We will start this session with Delgado from CSEM. He's the head of the embedded software group driving the digital health activity within CSEM. Hypertension is one of the deadliest diseases known to mankind. 1 in 5 people have a high blood pressure, most of them without knowing it. In his talk, Delgado will present the digital health platform built into the context of Riva Digital and how the data is today valorized to build a trustworthy AI that that provides meaningful health results for Swiss people. Welcome, Ricard.
Thanks for the very nice introduction. So my name is Ricard, and today let's jump into it. We're going to talk about hypertension. So let me just throw you some figures to see, so you see where we're coming from. So hypertension is, at least in 2015, was labeled by The Lancet as the largest epidemic ever known to mankind. This could sound very frivolous today, since we are just experiencing the whole pandemic of the COVID, right? But let's jump into the numbers so you can have a better perspective of what we're talking about here. So every year, you have about 7 million people in the US alone who die from high blood pressure. So it was said before, like 1 out of 5 people, about 20% of people have actually a high blood pressure without knowing it. So that is a disease which is silent. It's not diagnosed as much as it should. And the fact of having high blood pressure, it increases your risk of having a stroke by a threefold. That is why it's sometimes called like a killing disease, which is like the silent death. So it's overlooked and it's undermanaged. So if you look back at history in like about 100 years ago, and now we are measuring the blood pressure in more or less roughly the same way. You can see already on the screen how were the cuffs 100 years ago and how they are roughly used today. So there was not a big change. This is actually this kind of cuffs, these kind of tools. I'm sure you've seen them when you go to a visit of the doctor every year. They are inconvenient, they are, let's say, difficult to transport or not so nice to transport. And what is even worse is the data they generate is not so actionable. It's like you go to a doctor, they take a measurement, they tell you something, and till next year, right? So that's an issue, especially for somebody with so much, a disease which is so much underrepresented. So today, what I'm going to talk about is this initiative, which is a Swiss initiative called Riva Digital, which we focused on actually addressing the issue of the high blood pressure in Swiss people using smartphones. So not cuffs, not special devices, a smartphone, something that everybody has right away. Let me give you a bit of context of who am I and where I come from. So CSEM was introduced a bit before. It's actually a private company. We are defined as an RTO by the Swiss government. We were created by the Swiss government, by the way, in order to support the innovations in the Swiss landscape. So our heritage is the watchmaking industry. So we started with the microelectronics, like making very small devices like this. And that was like 30 years ago. We have expanded quite a lot. I'm coming from the medical development section, which as you can see already is certified ISO 13485, which means that we can actually do medical devices, which is not a gadget anymore. We're talking about the lives of people here. Our focus is not anymore about the watch industry. We still have quite a weight with the big companies in Switzerland with microelectronics. However, nowadays we focus much more in these 3 aspects, like precision manufacturing, especially for instrumentation, predictive maintenance, and so on. Digitalization, where the AI, data privacy, IoT, and digital health are from. And then there is like part of sustainable energy, more focused on, I would say, energy harvesting, more on digital grid, and so on and so forth. So going back to digital health, we've been pushing for a long time on wearable technology. We started a long time ago with, let's say, like the wellness market, the small gadgets. You see, you have like a fitness band that counts your steps. You have a hearable that we call right now to measure the heart rate on your ear at the same time you listen to music. You have smart shoes that measure how well you're running, and so on and so forth. Now things are getting much more serious because we're dealing with the health of people. So here on the right, you actually have one of the new versions of Holter ECG, in which you can have like a multiple electrocardiograms at the same time in a wearable device. So all this technology, we just don't sell it ourselves. We actually transfer it to the industry. Either we create a startup of our own, or we just sell the IP to a company who's going to explode it. So it's always about a partnership. Like here you have some examples, a couple of them Swiss, a couple of them from Europe or the US, focusing either from the health of women for this Riva startup in Zurich, Actia spin-off from CSCM not long ago on measuring as well like the blood pressure on the wrist, very looking a smart watch for step counting and fitness tracking, smart shoes I was telling before, and biometric wearable for identification in the BioWatch. So that's a bit of a vision of where I come from. But what is this initiative of Riva Digital? So it fits into a larger scheme called Digital Switzerland. Digital Switzerland is a cross-industry association here in Switzerland, as you can imagine, that actually focuses on digitalizing the economy. So mostly on pushing all these small things, these let's say apps, let's say digitizing the life sciences, fashion industry, fintech, and what I'm more concerned on is medtech. Out of that, there was a challenge that was posed. What can we do with all this high blood pressure that I was talking before, right? So hypertension is still one of the big issues in Switzerland, not only Switzerland, but in the world. So can we do something with the technique that we have, the technology we have right now? So we pose a challenge. We and a conglomerate of companies put a challenge that in 1 year, 2019, the challenge was in 2018, we can show that at least for 100,000 people in Switzerland and neighboring countries, we could have decreased the blood pressure of these people. The scheme looked like this. So at the end of the day, there was like several apps, either the app itself or the digital services that were running behind, that was thrown to the Swiss population, right? And the one which I'm more interested in is actually the one measuring the blood pressure. So up today, we have already about 300,000 digital blood pressure bit-to-bit measurements. That's much more refined than just point measurement that a cuff can result, but really bit-to-bit measurements. And these have been collected for about 23,000 people in Switzerland since 2018. So it has raised the awareness. And the cool thing here is that you don't need a cuff at all. So right now, the startup which is exploiting the blood pressure measurement on your phone, that is using just optical means, is Digital Therapeutics, in which they create, which is called a stream of PPG signal that is sent to a backend with an AI that I will talk later on, that estimates back the blood pressure and sends it back to the user. That allows us to give feedback to promote a change of lifestyle to this particular person. So there are many challenges here. There was like the part of data gathering on the edge, how you implement that in a robust way with all the phones that you have over there. There is the secure data transmission. There is a secure data storage. And there is the part of confidential computing. If you're using a cloud and you don't trust who is operating that cloud, you still have to make some changes there. And clearly there is a part of data analytics and AI. So this even though it was proposed last year, is not something which is new for CSCM. So measuring blood pressure on the wrist is nothing new for us. We started with LADs about 10 years ago in order to measure the pulsatile tissue of the humans, first on the chest, then on the wrist, on the finger. Then we used the photodiodes, and over there we got our PPG signal. that is the core. We invented what we call the OBPM. It's a trademark that we pushed, and we validated into several hospitals in Switzerland, most notably Schuf in Lausanne, which this was like the first prototype, just starting with just a pulse oximeter, something that you can measure out of the box on your finger, going through a clinical trial, so no more wellness, so really medical device. We had a machine learning-based model, which I would say more based on physics than on data, but we'll talk about a bit more about that later. And then we see that actually we can follow up changes of blood pressure. Just look at this graph, how the blood pressure is swinging. This is because it was during the operation room with a real measurement on an arterial line, so invasive measurement as a reference. This would look like this in its original days, in which you had like the PPG signal, you extract some features that our medical doctors, in collaboration with our data scientists, could say, okay, those measurements are important, and then you have all the regression methods that go behind. This has been evolving over time, and we are replacing all these models by explainable AI methods, which are much more easy, or let's say robust to validate if you eventually want to go to FDA or CE marking. So actually the evolution looks something like this. So on 2003, we started with the optical heart rate measurement. On 2010, we pinned down which are the features that are going to provide a meaningful estimation of the central blood pressure. We went through a clinical validation in several hospitals in 2013, in which it allows us to create the OBPM brand in 2016. Today, on 2019, through this Riva Digital Challenge, we could, there is a couple of startups which are actually exploiting all this technology. I would like especially to focus on one of them. I already said their name, Digital Therapeutics. You can actually go, if you have like a smartphone with an Android device or an iPhone device, you can just go to the App Store or the Play Store and get all these apps today. So the Riva Digital is still up there. It encourages people to keep in check their blood pressure. It's important because it offers you feedback of what to do if there is a too big of a change. And more recently, in the context of the current pandemics, the same startup is pushing the Co19 app, in which they allow you to track as well symptoms for COVID. So just to circle back, the 100 years of innovation today is not anymore what we've seen before, but it looks something like this. So we went to like a really awful calf from the 1900s to a smartphone app that everybody is having today. So thank you very much. And if you have any questions for me, I would be glad to answer them.
All right. I'm back for the questions. Thank you very much for your presentation. So we saw there's a watch that measures the calorie intake. How does that work?
So it's important to know that on that one, we focus really on having something which looked nice, like a really Swiss-looking watch, right? So over there is based with the different sensors that we put inside, like meaning accelerometers, gyroscopes, and so on. Over there, we can assess the activity of the people, and then we have our models that actually predict the calorie expenditure on that, right? Then what is the intake? It's something that you have to put yourself. Mm-hmm. But there is always a small part in the watch that tells you the balance. So how long have you been eaten, and then have you consumed all that, right? So the balance is what is important, not so much the expenditure and the intake, but actually the balance.
I see. The project, was that done in collaborations with doctors?
For sure. So any validation, if you want to make sure that the thing is medically approved, that is going to fly, there is always doctors in the loop. So in this case, the one I showed, Schuf played an important role, even though we have more connections in different parts in Switzerland to actually evaluate this. So clearly, I can make some tests with a cuff myself, but at the point I have to insert an arterial line in somebody, I prefer a doctor to do it for me.
And how do you convince people to trust AI algorithms?
That's why I focus so much and I put the stress on explainable AI. At the end, it's not about convincing the people, because people are going to trust at some point, but its concern is convincing the doctors and convincing FDA and the CE marking. Those are the ones who are going to approve your device and are going to put the label, this is good. And there is where explainable AI plays a role. A black box, nobody likes a black box. If you can understand it, you don't master it.
But do you understand if people are critical about that?
For sure. I mean, people were critical about many things in the past. So as a new disruptive technology comes along, it always generates fears because you don't know what it's going to do, right? We used to have, we're scared of robots, right? Now everybody has a Roomba at home. It's not going to kill us. So the AI is going to be the same. As it offers benefits and people see it, people are going to shift the perception. However, the first line of attack is always going to be the doctors, who are really the ones who know who they're talking about, and those are the ones to convince.
And which of those smart devices do you use personally?
Well, today I forgot my smartwatch. No, the smartphone clearly is one of them. I have my smart case, I have my smartwatch, and right now I'm starting to play with EEGs, so those that you put under your head, because there is quite a lot of value there for the future, I believe.
Thank you, Ricard. I see someone's waving out there, so I guess we already have to continue with our next presenter, but thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure.
Thanks.
Thank you.